Greetings and salutations everyone, it's been a while since we've done something like this and I thought why not? Here is my fantasy, sci-fi, fictional book novel collection. It's been 2 years since I can gladly say I've been an avid reader, reading fantasy, sci-fi and other forms of genre of fiction. I thought why not, let me show you guys some of my books that I've been reading and my collection. Bear in mind I haven't read, there's more books that I haven't read than I have read. Most of the books that I've bought physically and I own in my collection are pretty much all the books I've been wanting to read ever since I started reading in the first place, thanks to fellow booktubers across YouTube in general who have been very, very helpful and very, very like inspiring. But anyway, let's get into it. And let's start with my most recent read, or what I'm currently reading, is Uncharted The Fourth Labyrinth by Christopher Golden. You can see in my most recent video being the Uncharted fan film, theatrical movie review and comparison. I'm currently going through an Uncharted marathon at the moment. This was a book that went under my radar for many, many years until recently where I found out there's actually a novel that's a part of the canon. It doesn't really play that big of effect. It's not really a part of the games that much, but it's just an extra story if you are craving another Uncharted adventure with Nathan Drake and Victor Sullivan. Just think of it as like another episodic adventure with two treasure hunters. 50 pages in roughly, and yeah, I'm having a good time. It feels like I'm playing the game, but I'm reading it instead. So kudos to Christopher Golden. This is a very fun read. A must for Uncharted fans, and I'll probably do a review on it very, very soon once I finish it. Because I do want to marathon the Uncharted games as well. Hence the review that I did for the movie and fan film. Go watch it. Spider-Man Hostile Takeover, the prequel novel to the game of the same name. For the channel, I really want to do a marathon and review coverage of Spider-Man PS4 by Insomniac and the Miles Morales sequel as well, in preparation for Spider-Man 2 coming out this year, if not the next year. I don't know when the release date is, but I found that there was a prequel novel to this, and there's also a Miles Morales novel called Wings of Fury. Again, once my Uncharted marathon is over, I'm getting into this next, and I can't wait. I think the Insomniac version of Spider-Man is probably the most definitive Spider-Man we have seen. Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Can't wait. I had no clue that these books existed. There was a big lineup of Marvel prose novels, Marvel classic novels in the 90s that no one really talks about. So I had to hunt these down on eBay. After reading the Spider-Man Adam Troy Castro trilogy, it turns out there was like a plethora of books beforehand that came out before those set of books came out. And that is the Times Arrow trilogy, written by Tom DeFalco, Adam Troy Castro, and a couple other writers. It's a full-on trilogy starring Spider-Man and some members of the X-Men time traveling to stop, I believe to be, is Kang the Conqueror, who's the villain of this book. It seems like a very, very cool time travel story with superheroes. It's like Kang is like the next big bad in the MCU. It'll be a very, very fun and good jumping off point for whenever the Kang Dynasty movies and Secret Wars saga movies start coming out very, very soon. I swear to God, I'm sure, bro, I can do better. I can do better cover art than this, man. What is this? Come on, man. Marvel hire me, I can do that, man. Trust me. Spider-Man Carnage in New York. Okay, if you didn't know, one of my favorite YouTubers growing up was Jeremy Johns. He's a movie reviewer on YouTube. And there was one review he was talking about. It was the Venom sequel that came out a couple of years ago with Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson playing Carnage. And he suggested a book he did a read-through on in his review. And it was this book, Carnage in New York. Technically, it was the second book, Goblin's Revenge. This is the book that he was talking about and he was reading off. But thanks to Jeremy Johns, I shall read this whenever I can. If you're a Spider-Man fan, why not pick it up? Again, the thing about with these books, you're gonna have to go on eBay. Most of these books that I got were from the US. And there is the odd one or two person that you have in the UK owning these books, but I don't know, they're out of print. You barely get them on Kindle, so it's a bit of a treasure hunt, not gonna lie. I'm going to speed these through quickly, but we, of course, just as I mentioned earlier, the Adam Troy Castro Spider-Man Trilogy, Revenge of the Sinister Six, The Secret of the Sinister Six, Gathering of the Sinister Six. And what can I say? This is like my favourite. I'm very, very nostalgic towards these because these were like in my first wave of novels that I read when I got into reading fantasy and fiction in general. So this has like a soft spot for me, especially the first two books, Gathering and Revenge. Just finished Secrets very, very recently, a couple months back. Go watch my review. Great trilogy. Read it. There's an audiobook on Audible as well. Narrated by Tim Page. He does an awesome stellar Spider-Man performance in The Gathering of the Sinister Six. A must read, 10/10 if you're a fan of Spidey, of course. More Spider-Man, we have Spider-Man The Darkest Hours. It's kind of like an anthology and compilation of other novels. I think this was a thing Marvel did a couple of years back where they pretty much took Marvel classic novels from the 2000s, the early 2010s and the 90s, and they pretty much gathered. There's like a bunch. There's one for Spider-Man, there's one for X-Men, there's one for Avengers. I've only read like 40 pages into this. It's one of them ones where you really have to know the canon of the character and some of the storylines before going into it. I'm only in the first book and it only talks about like Morlun and the vampires. I despise recognize those characters and I have no idea what's going on in the story, so I was a bit lost, and that's why I kind of put it on pause. I'll get back to it whenever I can soon, but it's one of them ones where you pretty much have to like read the comics to actually get into this book particularly. Oh, okay, my first ever Star Wars book that I ever read, the expanded universe, Star Wars Death Trooper. It is my first horror novel that I read. It's one of the first books I've ever actually read. I actually went out my way to read and wanted to read. Went through a big Star Wars phase when I was like 12, 13, 14. This was the book that I would always take to school. Every time in high school, I don't know if you guys did this, but we had in our homeroom or form room, every Friday morning, we would have to have a book to read for the first 20 minutes of homeroom session. And if you didn't have it, you get detention. This was the book that was always in my bag, at the bottom of my bag, coming in clutch every time. The teacher was like, bring out your books now or you're getting a debt. This thing always came in clutch. Love it, and I have a lot of good memories on it. This is not really the best gateway in for Star Wars if you want to get into the EU. If you just want a fun horror book set in the Star Wars universe and canon, this is fun. It'll keep you at the edge of your seat. Cool. It's got a very, very fun surprise cameo made away through this novel. Continuing on the Star Wars train, the EU train, one of my favorite book trilogies of all time. Again, I did a review on this previously. Star Wars Heir to the Empire trilogy. We got Heir to the Empire, we got Dark Force Rising, and we have The Last Command, the Timothy Zahn trilogy, the Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy. There's so many names for these. The true sequel trilogy to Star Wars post Return of the Jedi. If you're not a fan of the way Disney handled the sequels and you want something like a bit more and better, read these books. You won't be disappointed, legit. It's got everything. It's got epic battles, new characters, there's expansion on the lore, no characters wasted. It feels like it's a Star Wars movie within your mind. Timothy Zahn really captures the essence of the movies in these novels, so they're really cool. This book has had me curious even before I was like an avid reader, before I even liked reading. This is one of those few novels that I was like, oh, that kind of piques my interest a little bit, but I never got around to it. I still haven't got around to it, but I'll keep you guys updated. Yeah, this is one of them books where I do want to fast track. Bro, it's only like 250 pages, so yeah, okay. I have no excuse. I should finish it this year, and you guys know how it is. I know there's a movie about it, but it's not that great. It's a bit of a bummer, but I think there's a TV show series coming out. All I know is it has one of the coldest opening lines. Let me read this to you, yeah? Let me read this to you. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. Literature. I'm one of those people that, like, when I walked out of watching Dune Part 1, the Denis Villeneuve adaptation, I was like, yeah, screw it, I'm not going to wait, because only half the book got adapted. I'm going to go out and read the book. I opened the book for like 2 pages. I was like, okay, nah, man, this is not what I expected when I was reading this. Yeah, when people say Dune's a very difficult read, it is a very difficult read. You can see why it's seen as like cold, hardcore sci-fi. It is not for me. I'm probably going to read it most likely after the second part comes out. Because one, I don't want to spoil the story for myself. I'm a big fan of the first film. My most recent pickup and a series that I am slowly dipping my toes into. I am currently playing The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Very fun world to explore. Geralt is such a cool protagonist. I've watched the first season of the Netflix series starring Henry Cavill. He's a goated actor. I think he plays Geralt very cool. Really intriguing about Geralt, the brooding like monster killer, that I find him so cool. Maybe it's just the design. I don't know what it is, man. The book, finally, Blood of Elves. I know the books take place before the events of the games, and I know the TV show is kind of like a mix of everything in one, taking bits and pieces from each novel. I'm curious how this is gonna go. And also, I'm a big fan of Yennefer. Do fantasy novels have like equivalent of something like waifus? Or like, you know how in anime and manga and stuff you have waifus, you have like your favorite like female character that you're obsessed with. Yennefer is #1, babe, when it comes to waifus of novels and fantasy. So hopefully she's in this book. This is the oldest dated book that I have in terms of release date. Okay, yeah, so I kind of went through a phase of watching the BBC Sherlock series. It's like a modernized version of the Sherlock Holmes novels written by Arthur Conan Doyle. I really enjoyed that show, specifically the first 2 seasons. They were goated, and I really fell in love with like the Sherlock character as a whole. In addition to that, I got into watching Detective Conan. If you don't know what that is, it's such a goated like anime series shown shonen detective series set in Japan. You're following a boy called Shinichi Kudo, who's inspired by the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, hence Detective Conan. So because of those two shows specifically, I wanted to read some of the original source material, being The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Conan Doyle. My gateway, this is my beloved gateway into fantasy, Brandon Sanderson, The Final Empire. I know it's like a very, very cliche thing now for new readers, but bro, Mistborn is like my child. It's like my baby. I love this one so much. Era 1, man. Era 1 is so good. Final Empire. We got the Wall of Ascension. Bro, political intrigue. And we got the Hero of Ages. Check out my review for it and why you should read it. It's so goated. It's got a goated power system. It's so intricate. The characters, fall in love with them so well. And the world is so cool. Of course, the highlight for me has to be, again, besides the characters, the battle system. The power of allomancy is so cool. I always saw it as like metal manipulation meets bending. Magneto meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. That is allomancy. It's so cool. Oh my god, bro. It's so good. I always say it, if you want to get into fantasy and you're very, very new, you don't want to read some of the old stuff because it goes over your head, Brando Sando is the guide for you. So, you know, Final Empire, that's a great way to start for anyone who wants to jump in. The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, and the Bands of Mourning. Era 2 Mistborn, set hundreds upon hundreds of years later to the events of the first trilogy. Era 2 is a lot more quirky and a lot more light-hearted compared to the first era of Mistborn novels. This is more like a fun detective, gunslinging western style fantasy genre hybrid. So I always say Mistborn's kind of like the fantasy version of Avatar: The Last Airbender, while Era 2 is like Legend of Korra. It's a good comparison, I think. And it's just, if you're a fan of like western inspired heists and shootouts and action sequences mixed with like a fantasy flair and element with Brandon Sanderson's writing, yeah, this is the book for you. You have to read Era 1 first, just saying, because you're going to be hella confused what the hell's going on in this world. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, there's a lot of Brandon Sanderson in this video. 1/3 of my book collection is legit Brandon Sanderson. It is what it is. His reading, his writing style is just so accessible. For someone who's, again, very, very new like me, Skyward is fun. I always thought of it as Buzz Lightyear meets How to Train Your Dragon meets Top Gun. Mold that in together, set it on a sci-fi planet, and you have Skyward. Hearing the term YA, you do get a bit guarded because they're like, oh great, it's going to be like a dumbed down version of a fantasy novel. Even though like the word prose on is like intricate, and it's not as adult compared to his other books like Mistborn and Stormlight Archive. Definitely give Skyward a shot if you're a fan of like cockpit fights, space battles, air dogfights. If you're a fan of like Star Wars Rogue Squadron battles, Top Gun Maverick, and of course like a band of pilots that are very, very young on a coming of age story and adventure to defend their homeland against aliens. I definitely want to give this a reread very soon. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so we have this dinosaur of fantasy novels, the ultimate magnum opus by Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archive. What can I say? The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, and Rhythm of War. As of this video, I've only read Way of Kings. In terms of objectivity, this is probably the best fantasy novel I've ever read. The Way of Kings of the Stormlight Archive is like the ultimate fantasy novel. If you want a giant-ass world, if you want multiple viewpoints of characters, if you want epic battle armor, if you want like multiple battle systems happening at the same time, and if you love world building, if you love fantasy elements and tropes, you'd be stupid not to read this book series. Like roughly each book's like 1,300 pages each, which is very, very, very long. If I were to compare it to something, think of it like a mix between One Piece and Lord of the Rings. Tell me if you agree, if you read these, but that's my thought process when I went into it. And there's definitely some stuff where I'm like, yeah, this will definitely not work in live action. Possibly an anime or a Western animated style, but there's a lot of like absurd, epic stuff that happens in these novels, like grand epic, like Lord of the Rings, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, Game of Thrones style, like scale that we're talking about in the Stormlight Archive. It's epic. Another book that I have sentimental value on, as it was one of the few books, again, up there with Mistborn, that kicked off my fantasy journey, Jim Butcher's Aeronauts Windless series, and this is basically like Final Fantasy steampunk in a novel. The kingdoms and people and civilizations live in these like giant spires in the sky, where the earth below is decimated, and it's too dangerous, and it's pretty much uninhabitable. So people live off like this magical crystal technology where they power ships, as well as talking cats. Talking cats is the thing that really, really makes this book a 10 out of 10. Because of how much I love reading Aeronauts Windless, I picked up the first box set of the Dresden Files series. I haven't gotten around these, but I've been told it's kind of like a mix of Constantine, Hellblazer of Vertigo DC Comics, and a fusion between Supernatural. Carrying on that Final Fantasy RPG style inspired like story writing and storytelling, I have the Kings of the Wild series by Nicholas Yeam. It's a, you know, bring the band back together type story set in a fantasy world, of course, where it's pretty much like a rescue story from what I've been told. And I cannot wait to read this. I've been told that if you're a fan of like music and pop culture, there's a lot of references. We have a sequel as well called Body Rose, which is, I think, is the descendants of these characters. If you're a fan of RPGs, there's a lot of fun references in these books. A fantasy novel that I've been told to read since I started reading fantasy novels in general, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. From what I've seen of her interviews on YouTube, she seems like she's bloody talented, especially for her age. I think she was 21 or 22 when she wrote these and published these. Bloody hell, what am I doing with my life? Bruh. This is like a grimdark fantasy set in an Eastern Asian style world. Definitely one of the most eye-catching titles I read, The Poppy War. It's definitely one of those occasions where I clearly judge a book by its cover and name. Hey, but it works. The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss, apparently the George R. Martin 2.0. This is one of those series where I do want to like just set a chunk of time alone where I can dedicate and read. These books specifically, it's one of those ones where I think you really need to like just take your time reading and enjoy the prose and writing style of Patrick Rothfuss. He's one of those writers where he really puts care into his wording and prose, and these are fat books. Yeah, 700 pages. Yep, 700 pages. Apparently he's like a George R. Martin where we don't know when the third and final book's gonna come out. But in the meantime, I haven't touched these yet, and I think I'm gonna have a fun reading these whenever I can. The fact that, again, it's like the Poppy War, the Kingkiller Chronicle, it just sounds catchy, it sounds intriguing, hence why I got it. Yeah. The Lies of Lochlo Mora by Scott Lynch. This book follows a group of con artists, and especially the main character, and it's pretty much like a band of different thieves and con artists set in this like Mediterranean Venetian inspired fantasy world. It's really, really cool. I'm a fan of Assassin's Creed, so I was told to give this a read if I was a fan of that. Just like Patrick Rothfuss with the Kingkiller Chronicle, the first time when I was reading a fantasy novel where I'm like, oh my god, like the words themselves, like the way they are written is an art form on itself. So it's something I came to really appreciate while reading it. It takes a lot longer to read because you want to like read it and appreciate every word that's being written. It's one of them ones, hence why I haven't finished it. And the last book, The Once and Future King, I do like Arthurian legend in general. There's something about the whole sword and the stone concept always like encapsulates me, whether that be from stories like The Sword in the Stone, of course, to something like Legend of Zelda, where Link pulls the Master Sword. It's the classic coming of age story, and that's King Arthur. Stories from King Arthur and the Round Table has been a massive influence in my own writing. Given my own manga, Legacy Excalibur, there's a lot of Arthurian legend influence on that as well. So it is something that I plan to read multiple times, this one. So if you're a fan of King Arthur, read my manga, Legacy Excalibur, link down below. What can I say? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that was my fantasy collection of books from fiction to sci-fi to superheroes. A lot of Spider-Man and a lot of Brandon Sanderson is what it is. I'm still fairly new, but yeah, I think I've got a good, decent amount of reading to do. I like to think these choice of books kind of represent the way I am in terms of my own personal like character that you see me as. If you have read any of those books that I haven't read yet, what do you guys think? Is there any particular book that is a must read that I haven't got yet? Please comment down below and let me know. And yeah, I shall see you guys next time. Keep reading, everyone.